Pope Francis is calling for surrogate motherhood to be outlawed across the world. And I can tell you beyond a reasonable doubt, if you are a faithful Christian, he's right. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Red Top Report. I am your host, Joe Enders, and holy cow, Pope Francis is going scorched earth against surrogacy. And we're talking about surrogate mothers, meaning where you basically use a woman's womb as a rental space to grow the baby that you want to give birth to and eventually take care of yourself. Now, there's a video actually of him saying this, right, Ronan? Let's hear the Pope.
Yeah, man, let's check it out.
Cari ambasciatori, la via della pace esige il rispetto della vita di ogni vita umana, a partire da quella del nascituro nel grembo della madre, che non può essere soppressa né diventare oggetto di mercimonio. Al riguardo ritengo desprecabile la pratica della cosiddetta maternità surrogata, che lede gravemente la dignità della donna e del figlio. Essa è fondata sullo sfruttamento di una situazione di necessità materiale della madre. Un bambino è sempre un dono e mai l'oggetto di un contratto.
Ooh, Ronan. So what are your first initial thoughts of this? Just so everybody knows, this was an address that he gave to as a foreign policy address to ambassadors for the Holy See. So, I mean, what was your initial thoughts?
I mean, he called it deplorable, man. I don't think you can't. I mean, there you go, right there.
It's extremely authoritative. I mean, he's not leaving much to the imagination, I don't think, with this. And look, guys, you know, basically what he's saying is that, you know, a child is a gift. Essentially what surrogate motherhood is, you know, doing is turning a child into like a commodity, a commercial transaction, a means to which a mother or a woman can like make money to carry her own child in her womb. And in the process, you know, giving that child to other people, in many cases, homosexual couples, by the way. A lot of them like to do in vitro. A lot of them like to do surrogacy and those sorts of things to basically treat a baby like a Build-A-Bear and give birth to it and adopt it as their own, depriving it of its true and biological mother. So I think we have other statements from the church as well discussing this specific issue, and it's really important. So let's see what the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith has to say. This is from 1987. A lot of people don't know, but at the time, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith was actually headed by who would become Pope Benedict XVI, who was Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger at the time. And he says, surrogate motherhood represents an objective failure to meet the obligation of maternal love, of conjugal fidelity, and of responsible motherhood. It offends the dignity and the right of the child to be conceived, carried in the womb, brought into the world, and brought up by his own parents. This is something that children have a right to. They have a right to those things. Now, obviously, there's situations where they're deprived of that, things that are tragic and unfortunate, but the situations in which those occur is not a moral instance. You know, it's extenuations, circumstances, consequences of the sinful world. It's objectively evil for a kid to be deprived of those things. So what I find the most interesting, I think, about this is that it goes on to say it sets up to the detriment of families a division between the physical, psychological, and moral elements which constitute those families. So essentially, what does surrogate motherhood do? It breaks apart families. Yes, this is something that we've been talking about quite a bit on Red Top Report. For the longest time, we've been talking about how, you know, divorce separates families. We've been talking about how abortion can destroy families. We've been talking about how homosexuality can destroy families or prevent the existence of families. We've been talking about how sex before marriage can do the same thing. Contraception. All of these things do harm to families. Yeah, surrogate motherhood is on that list. And it's okay to have it on that list. In fact, we should be very happy that that is on the list of things that destroys families because it is objectively immoral. Think about what you're doing for a second. You're taking a human person and think about it not as a fetus. Think about it as a full-grown human person. And you're saying, you're never going to have your real mother. Not only are you never going to have your real mother, but in fact, your mother is going to sell you to somebody, potentially a homosexual couple, that will teach you your entire life from the cradle to the grave that homosexuality is an acceptable means of life, or means of living your life, of doing things like that. So where are you going to end up most likely in that instance? You're going to end up in a state of grave error, believing grave errors, things that could potentially and very realistically send you to hell for eternity. Yeah, guys, that is a consequence of surrogate motherhood. But regardless of the homosexual aspect of things, the fact that your mother, your own mother, the person that carried you in her womb, that you were connected to biologically by an umbilical cord, is going to take you and sell you so she can pay her bills is absolutely a rejection of your dignity as a person. And honestly, on a purely natural level, I want everybody watching to just ask themselves for 1 second, how would you feel if you found out that your mother did that to you? I can't imagine that there's a single person watching right now that would not be hurt by that. Rona, would you be hurt if you found that out?
Extremely hurt, yes.
It's a very traumatizing thing. That's a very traumatizing thing. And it's because inherently and naturally, it's a deprivation of your human dignity. I don't need the Catholic Church to prove that. But it does. And it condemns it because we know these things. The Catholic Church knows these things. That's why these teachings are guided by the Holy Spirit. Our Creator knows us better than anyone else. You know, I would even take it a step further, though, than the official Catholic documents have taken it on a theological level. The fact that you're commercializing and selling another person to do what they will with you, to raise you, to cultivate you. Sure, it's not exactly the same thing as slavery, but it's pretty darn close because those people are going to own you and form you for 18 years. And your mother is selling you to them to do so. And it's, in a way, naturally even more disordered than slavery, because slavery would be, your enemy maybe capturing you and selling you off or something like that, or somebody kidnapping you and selling you off. In those instances, it's like an enemy doing that to you. Imagine somebody who is literally created to love you differently and more intimately than any other person, with the exception of God himself doing it to you. Yeah, that's a little bit more disordered, I would say. But it is a lot like slavery. And let's kind of think about it from the perspective of this. And I want to just read this statement from the Bible that actually talks about slavery, because there's going to be a bunch of people, I'm not kidding, guys, that are going to go and say, oh, the Bible justifies slavery, so they don't even think it's a problem. And then they'll cite the letter to Philemon by St. Paul as the reason. Now, what you guys might not know about the letter to Philemon, it's about St. Paul writing to a master about a slave that ran to him. Philemon is the slave owner. Onesius is the slave. And Paul is specifically writing to him about what happened and that what he's telling the slave to do. And this is what a lot of people, a lot of atheists, a lot of secularists will use to tell you that slavery is justified in the Bible. But let's actually read the text here and actually get what it really says about slavery. Perhaps this is why he was parted from you for a while, that you might have him back forever, no longer as a slave, but more than a slave, as a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you, both in the flesh and in the Lord. Now, there's two interpretations that you can take from this. One, he's asking, Philemon to no longer treat him like property, but to treat him as a brother, to treat him as a family member while he remains a slave. There's another interpretation of this as well, to where if you were to treat him as a brother, if you were not to treat him as property, as somebody you purchased and bought, and did something like that, that you must actually free him. And then have him under your roof as your brother in a spirit of adoption in a way. So what does he want to do with Onesius here? I think both interpretations let you know that the commodification of human beings and the rejection of their human dignity is the real problem. That's why slavery is wrong. That's why the popes say slavery is wrong. Pope Gregory actually condemned. He actually condemned the transatlantic slave trade. So can we put up the quote from him? So guys, this was in the year 1839, mind you, before the Civil War in America. There were still slaves in America while this was going on. And he's specifically talking about the transatlantic slave trade of blacks. So this is what Pope Gregory the 16th had to say. He says, "We warn and adjure earnestly in the Lord, faithful Christians of every condition, that no one in the future dare to vex anyone, despoil him of his possessions, reduce to servitude," and that's talking about slavery, "or lend aid and favor to those who give themselves up to these practices, or exercise that inhuman traffic by which the blacks, as if they were not men, but rather animals." This is what he's talking about, the reduction of human dignity. "Having been brought into servitude in no matter what way, are, without any distinction, in contempt of their rights of justice and humanity, bought, sold, and devoted sometimes to the hardest of labor." Notice he's talking about buying and selling here, and why it's bad to buy and sell people. Now, Catholicism is not against people owning one another. However, it is a mutual ownership of one another. A great example of this is marriage. That's right. Your body is owned by your spouse when that happened. It's not that the concept of owning a person is wrongful or evil. It's that the persons that you have authority over, the people that you do share ownership of your parts of your personhood with, that you love them and treat them with dignity and treat them with respect. That's the problem. It's not the mere concept. And this is where a lot of Enlightenment thinkers got this idea wrong. Now, Pope Gregory also he absolutely forbade Christians from engaging in this. Do we have the quote for that? Here it is. He says, "We reprove then, by virtue of our apostolic authority, all the practices above mentioned as absolutely unworthy of the Christian name." Meaning, if you're engaging in this rabid rejection of human dignity, the commodification of people, the reduction of them to property, mere property, is entirely unacceptable. According to Pope Gregory the 16th. And it's all building on exactly what Paul was talking about in the letter to Philemon. So Christians don't support slavery, and that's actually precisely why we are against surrogate motherhood, which does the very same thing that he's talking about to blacks, with a couple exceptions like abuses and being forced into hard labor, which could happen in certain instances, no doubt. And obviously the eventual, the eventual freedom that they would obtain by turning 18 and becoming an adult and doing all of those things. But making the mother engage in such a dehumanization of her own child. I mean, that's just beyond the pale for me.
Yeah, man, that's disgusting.
It is. It's truly disgusting. So I think I want to wrap it up on this note. Pope Francis is getting at a massive problem that just our society as a whole has in general, and that's turning people into objects of personal gain. This largely derives from individualism, the idea that the individual is the building block of society. We need to focus on families being the building block of society, as Pope John Paul II has, as the Catholic Church has said. And it rejects the foundational principles of our country. I know. They're right behind me, written on that flag. We need to think about this at a deeper level on how we want to structure our society, how we want to view ourselves as units in a civilization. Because if mothers themselves are permitted by law to to commercialize their children. How on earth do you not expect people to do the same thing to their enemies? And that's why, exactly as Pope Francis said, we need to outlaw surrogate mothers. And that is the bottom line. We need to outlaw surrogate mothers in every country across the world. It should be outright banned, because we're trying to build a moral civilization filled with virtuous people. And with that said, guys, that's all we got for this episode. We're looking forward to catching you on the next one. You got to follow us on Instagram. You got to follow us on X. You got to subscribe to the channel and hit that notifications bell so you always know when we are dropping new content. And we'll be getting back to you guys with how you can support us financially. And trust me, we got something awesome getting built. You're not going to want to miss it. God bless you guys.